What's up, guys? John Sintez, Cutternation Podcast. I'm so excited today. I'm a special guest. Jordan, my man from armcare.com, is going to go over. But first, please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, share this. I'm very, very excited about the information that we're going to be getting directly from the source here for our community here in Cutter Nation and everybody here in San Diego. You know that we use the armcare.com unit, and I'm so excited to bring some of the questions that I've had some of the parents reach out to and ask about, as well as any of the insights that you guys get me, because you guys have said things to me that I've been like, wait, hold on, like what's going on here? And so I appreciate you taking a little time. I know I apologize. We had some scheduling issues last time. We had our live at bats, our sparring, our favorite thing we do, ran a little long, and it kind of ruined our time. So I appreciate you taking some time out of your day, Jordan.
Yeah, no problem.
So first, let's start off. Armcare.com, and it's a very great name, by the way. I'll nail the name. I explain the process of the unit and the evolution of the company. When I met you guys officially at ABCA, and as we went through, it was you had dropped some knowledge on me about the different tools and the things that you guys come from. Could you let's start off with the genesis of the company, because I just love how it evolved to where it is.
Yeah, so the company is the same as crossover symmetry. And most everybody in baseball knows crossover symmetry, especially if you've, been at a Division One, if you have played in the minor leagues or professional baseball to any extent, pretty much in every clubhouse when it comes down to it. Um, you know, so the owner of the company, Dugan Moran, left-handed pitcher, pitched at Washington, coached at Washington, coached at Washington State, coached at a junior college, high school, kind of all over the place. But he had a shoulder issue, and him and his dad kind of created the crossover symmetry. His dad is a PT, lives out in Arizona, but they created it using the old Bowflex to start off, and kind of put together a system to strengthen the shoulder. He started throwing harder. They knew they were onto something and started marketing it, and that was kind of the genesis of crossover symmetry. And I'm doing a very poor job of summarizing that whole story, but just to make it easy. And then from there, Dugan knew he always wanted to kind of specify that a little bit more. And that's where Ryan Croton and myself came in. Was while I was working for Tom House, we were using dynamometry, which is this right here, just our sensor. We were using a bunch of different ones where we were doing some consulting work with a couple other MLB organizations, tracking strength over the course of a season. And that was kind of my introduction into dynamometry. And then from there, coaching in college, went over to the Angels. Me and Ryan Croton met up over there, and Ryan brought in dynamometry, and that dusted off the cobwebs for me. And I was like, hey, I remember using this. That's where we started learning a lot more about it, diving deeper into huge data sets. And then from that point, Dugan had come over. He was, building out the dynamometer. We were going to actually bring this into the Angels because the dynamometer we were using, it was just too big. We couldn't bring it anywhere with us. And when we had the front office change, that's where we went over and joined up with Armcare and thought, instead of just kind of being locked in to really only impact our group of 200 athletes at the professional level, now we have 37 athletes that we get an impact on a daily basis through dynamometry, through customized training, and through diving into that data and helping them get better. And we're seeing some really cool results from it. So we're able to cast that wide net, kind of combining crossover symmetry's strength tools with Armcare's way to customize it and make it applicable to you.
Yeah, the customization was the coolest thing that went through, and the report that you get is just so clean and basic and informative. And when we've showed a couple parents to it, where I've had some kids rehabbing, and I just threw them on the test and they got done, and I go, okay, well, this is what
Mm-hmm.
this means. And they're like looking at it on their phone, they're like, wait, this took 10 minutes and now I have a physical therapy report. I'm like, yeah, I'm blown away every time. Every time I do the test and I get the email, I'm like, this is the craziest, coolest thing I've ever seen. And so kudos to you guys, because that's one of my main goals with what I'm trying to do from a player's perspective of Cutter Nation is I'm always seeking information and learning. That's pretty much what's gotten me to this point, and why I think I've been able to transfer a lot of the information and skill down to the people that we work with, is that I'm going to the ABCA, I'm on the internet, I'm trying to find the next best thing, and then finding companies like you guys that are pushing the envelope, and then I'm at the ABC and I'm seeing debates with famous guys with mustaches, and just, it's a fun little, process. So, you know, one of my first questions I want to get to is, what were some of the struggles from the crossover symmetry process, from the beginning to get to, this beautifully designed app? Is that, because there's so many little, I'm loving the storytelling process, because that normally turns into, some key piece of information.
Yeah, I think one of the big things to kind of address that question would be making sure that it is the simplest product to use that's going to give you the highest yield. So one of the things people always ask is, well, why don't you do a whole lot of a whole lot of lower body testing? And the reason is, well, we can learn a lot about the lower body from the shoulder. So most everything from a rotational athlete, a pitcher, is going to show up in what's going on the shoulder. So if there is a change in stride length, stride angle, it's going to fatigue the shoulder more, and we can find that out from a post exam, to where now we can see that information and go back, dig through mechanics, and then understand if we need to make any type of adjustments or if we just fatigue more from throwing. But that was the big thing, was making sure we don't add in too much to confuse or disorient, and make it usable for the, we have some 8-year-olds running it, but also making sure that there's enough meat and potatoes in there that are, I mean, you've seen it. You have like a lot of big leaguers in their post game. One of them, I won't use names just in case they don't want us to, but
Mhm.
threw his no hitter last year, and in his locker is his arm care box.
Mhm.
And we got a bunch of people, circling it. So we got to make sure that we can cover that whole list of everybody, that our veteran major leaguers can use this and get a lot out of it, as well as our kids that are just wanting to stay healthy, playing travel ball, getting ready for a showcase, can stay healthy and use this thing as well and get better. So that's our big thing, was making sure we could boil it down into a process that is understandable. And that's where we get into our key metrics. And, we could have called it relative strength, but most people wouldn't understand this. We call it arm score. What's the score of your arm? Like how strong is your body relative, or your arm relative to your body weight? And then we could have, came up with something crazy, but it's strength and velocity ratio, SVR. How strong are you compared to your velocity? Is it good? Is it blue, which is good? Is it yellow, or is it purple? Like where are we at here?
Mhm.
Blue is
Mhm.
good.
Mhm.
And then the fatigue, we just wanted to make it look like a battery, because we feel like everybody would understand that. Originally it was like this big equation thing, and we're like, that's not going to be understood by anybody. So we just made it look like a battery. It's like, is your battery full or is your battery empty? And that's going to help you adjust day to day. So we just tried to make it as visual and as straightforward as possible. And there's a lot of genesis and change throughout that, to where originally all it was, here is your strength. And it was total strength when me and Ryan first came in. And it was great. It's good if you have that, but there was no way for that user who was not familiar with dynamometry to go, well, what do I do now? And there
Mhm.
was the custom training, and we are actually updating the custom training to get a lot more in depth as we get going with that. So, hopefully that answered the question. I know I
Yeah,
kind
it
of
did. It did. This it's the for the guys that don't understand, people that do know symmetry or not, do a quick Google and you'll immediately recognize the
Mhm.
bands, and that'll understand that. And then, yeah, the algorithm, right? The process of doing the testing from there. You know, my follow-up is, how did you guys decide on these tests? Because obviously there's so many different tests and angles and things that come in, and it is such a simple process of, measuring the angles and the force output. But what made you decide on these particular ones?
Mhm. Yeah. So, in terms of the range of motion, obviously we want to know that internal range of motion to see how that arm's internally rotating. Same with external, and then the full range on that flexion test. So those are kind of the three. Just we can get a lot out of those, and while they're not going to be perfect, just because there's going to be user error in a range of motion test you do on your own, if they're doing it consistently, we can get a lot out of those three tests. And then it doesn't require a practitioner. And then from the strength standpoint, we like internal rotation, because that's going to tell us what's going on with the elbow. A lot of people don't realize this, but the internal rotators are what actually keep your elbow lower stress. It's a lot of that shoulder that's doing a lot of that work. Then we do external rotation. That's going to protect the shoulder. And then we look at the balance between those, obviously. So we're looking at elbow health, shoulder health, and then my favorite is scaption, that straight lever where we're pressing in reverse. And the reason I like that scaption one was there was actually a study that Rockies published going over that scaption plane of movement. And it was like if you're only going to do one test, you got to do Scaption. That one's going to tell you about 85% of everything you need to know. So for us, Scaption is the most important test in there because it gives you so much. It is related to velocity. It's related to your ability to throw strikes. It's related to your ability to stay healthy. It's related to your ability to bounce back on a day-to-day basis. And for those guys and anybody who's listening, go back and check out the podcast we did with Kaylee Shores at UCF. She was just using Scaption to determine player success on their analytics at UCF, and it's unreal how much Scaption goes into, especially at the college level. And then we use grip, and we do the pinch grip like we're throwing a four-seam fastball, or for your guys' case, a cutter. We're throwing a cutter with this. So we get into that 90-90 position. We want to really isolate what that FDS is doing, that overlays the UCL, because that's our last line of defense when it comes to keeping that elbow healthy. So those are our 4 measures. It takes like 5 minutes, 6 minutes to run through a full test once you're cranking. And like I said, we could add more in, but we're just not going to get any extra usable data that we don't already have. And it's got to be easy for the players to use, because if it's taking more time than that, you start messing with guys' routines and you're really throwing them off. So hopefully that answered the question of why we chose those 4 strength measures and those 3 range of motion. They're going to cover, I mean, we're going to get 98% of what we need out of any of that. And that extra 2%, we can get that by checking velocities or looking at the fatigue numbers and really filling the gaps as we go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I said, those 4 simple exercises, and you touched on something there, which was one of my other questions, was the age ranges, right? You said that you got 8-year-olds to, professional athletes. As people grow in the system, do you have any stories on, and obviously don't use names, but how long people have been using the device in the system? Like what's your longest case, right? Like what's your longest case? What's your best arm score jump that you guys have seen?
Yeah, so since we've gone from the beta testing to actually releasing the product in, gosh, I want to say 2021 was when we made it available for everybody to start getting outside of that beta testing, maybe late 2020, I forget exactly when. So we've had guys that have been staying on for that 3-year period now, a little over 3 years. And gosh, we're now starting to have people, I just had a guy email me who said, my son started using this. He's only been using it for about 7 weeks, 8 weeks. But in that time frame, he saw about an 8-mile-an-hour jump in velo. He says his kid's elbow's out of pain, and now he's leading. I forget what state he's in, but he's leading the state in varsity for strikeouts, and he's got like a .8 something ERA, and he's throwing the ball really well, throwing more strikes than he ever has. So we have a lot of really cool success stories. We're actually starting to post them for the players who've been reaching out saying, "Hey, can we post this?" We've seen some guys gain 85 points on their arm score.
Yeah.
We've seen some guys gain over 100 pounds of total strength. And shoot, we've seen some really cool ones where I have a guy who pitches for me who over an 18-month window has gained 18 miles an hour.
Wow.
So really cool. Like obviously they've grown and done some things on there, but they're also seeing that strength gain right along with it. And they're able to track that strength and velocity and how it's going up to handle those things. So there's some really cool stories. We've had a couple of them on our podcast. A couple guys that took it with them from one school, went over into pro ball, and they said it was the difference maker for why they didn't get released as a free agent, because they're able to kind of mix and match and change the way that they're throwing and doing stuff so they're always fresh. And then the other guys who are getting the cranky arm and whatever else is going on, they're the ones who get released where they're still fresh and going around. They can go to post. So there's some pretty cool success stories that it's more than just staying healthy. It is also a performance tool for the guy that really wants to dial in a 5-day reliever rotation, a 7-day rotation in high school or college. So it's really how in depth someone wants to go with it on how big that success story can be.
I love that because that's exactly the way we use it, just information, like how, your feel versus the real, right? And
Mm-hmm.
just maybe your arm feels good today, but then you do your arm score and then you're down. And I've got a couple kids rehabbing right now, and that's actually what's happened where hey, I feel pretty good. I threw yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Should I throw today? And I said, well, listen, before you even ask that question and try to answer it on your own, why don't you just go do a test and find out? And then they
Yeah.
see that their score went down, and then you could see it like just like sad face where they're like, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't throw." I'm like, "That's exactly why this device
Yep.
gives you objective data that now I'm not saying don't throw, but like make your decision from there. Is it alarming because it went down 10, 11, 20 points, or is it 2? And you're like, well, maybe I could, you know? So,
Hmm.
that was my favorite part of it, which was you obviously people try to hack test, fake test, do things
Hmm.
to figure out how to get around certain scenarios. But in this one, you really can't, number one. And number two, like it does such a great job of just summarizing the process so you can just be like, okay, well, maybe I'm not as strong as I thought I was today. And
Hmm.
just we were speaking a little bit off air about some of the guys that we've talked to in the Mexican League and how they've gone through, and they're just really caught off guard with the simplicity and then the report that it comes through. So really awesome job for you guys. And this may sound like me just patting you guys on the back for the whole podcast, but there's just so much. I've got plenty of more questions and stuff, but there's just so much that you guys have brought to the table for the beginning of this that I just you know the amount of people that are unaware of it, even at higher levels, and college kids, or they've seen the ad, which is what I want to get into next. And they're it's almost like it's too good to be true, because your guys' ad is great. You know what I mean? You hit a lot of key points, and then you hit that, the 4 mile an hour guarantee, and people are just like, what? And then they ask me,
Hmm.
well, John, could you use 4 miles an hour? And I don't know of a pitcher that wouldn't want 4 miles an
Yeah.
hour. I don't know exactly what you're talking about. So why 4 miles an hour? What came up with, how did you guys come up with that? Obviously I'm seeing data sets and stuff running there, but
Hmm.
tell me the story about how you came up with that idea.
Yeah. So that 4 mile an hour guarantee is if you're not throwing if you're 88, we're probably going to get you to 90 when it comes down to it. If you're 82, we're probably going to get you to 86 or higher. So we have a huge litany. Like I just mentioned, the guy who gained 18 miles an hour.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we have guys that have gained way more than that. We've had guys who have obviously gained a little bit less. But as we started pulling through these data sets, and the one that I'm most proud of is what we're doing with our pro athletes. But I'll kind of get to that in a second. But the way we pulled that number was our young athletes below high school, we're seeing about an 11 mile an hour gain. And then we had our high school guys that were seeing about a 6.5 mile an hour gain over the time using the system. Our college and our minor leaguers were 1.7 mile an hour gain, and then our big leaguers were a point 0.7 or a 0.8 mile an hour gain on their average fastball.
Hmm.
So that equates to a little bit more on that max end, obviously.
Hmm.
Because for me, I like to see those averages increase, not just necessarily only the max.
Right.
So when we kind of took all that information and put it together, 4 miles an hour was kind of where it leveled itself off. That almost everybody's gotten that. Right now, we've had 2 people return the system because they didn't get the 4 mile an hour. And then as we started digging through it, I had to, we still refunded them, but it was one of those things we had to have the rude awakening moment when I went through the CSV with the dad. I was like, your kid actually hasn't done anything. And the dad goes, well, my son told me he was. I go, well, I'm looking at it here right now with you on Zoom and I'm sharing it with you. There's 0 things that your kid has done. And then he had another kid who had done everything and he gained like 2 miles an hour. So like one of his kids did it, one of his kids didn't, one of them gained, one of them didn't. So those were the only people we've had to refund so far on that. And we also have our surgery-free guarantee that if you're running the system the way that you should and all these things, then we'll honor that as well. So right now we've had 2 of our 37,000 users. We have 2 reported surgeries.
Mm.
One of them hits home because it was a kid that I've known for a long time, and he went to college. Nobody else was using arm care there, and he was embarrassed and he stopped using it, and then he ended up getting hurt. And then
Mm.
the other one was a guy who did everything perfect. And even if you're crossing at the crosswalk, you can get hit by a car, right? So that one was just
Right.
bad luck. I don't think we're ever going to get to 0 just because I don't think it's 100% possible just because everybody's, different ligament aspects. They may have already been coming in injured and not aware of it.
Hmm.
But I mean, right now we're 0.0007% injury rate, which if we were normal, we should be 53% injury rate, I believe, or 51. I forget the exact number. So
Wow.
we're doing good. I don't think we're ever going to be 0 across the board. I don't know if that's possible. I hope so. But that's why we're revamping the training. We want to try to lower that number even more. We want to get more zeros in front of it. And I know I got off topic there, but that's kind of where those numbers came from. And I'm most proud of that big league number, that 0.7 or 0.8 mile an hour increase on the average velo, because it's so much harder to get improvement out of a big leaguer than it is out of a 10-year-old, because they're
Right.
just so much more trained. And I always tell guys the example that if you sent me and Gordon Ramsay to a cooking class, I'm going to make way more progress than Gordon Ramsay, because I use microwaves and toasters. Gordon Ramsay is not going to make as much progress because he's an elite chef. So that's why his Gordon Ramsay's 0.7% gain is more impressive than my 15% gain out of the same course and same time frame. So hopefully that makes sense as to why we have that wide range of kind of how we look at it, and that 4 miles an hour kind of covers everybody that we
Right.
deal with, as opposed to kind of bucketing it into just age groups.
Right. That's yeah, exactly. That makes sense. I love the average concept to that right in there. You know, on the pro side, when you're seeing your guys go through it, the time frame of growth, right? Like when you're seeing guys, because it's so hard as a pro, right? Like you got some guys like me that are indie ball grinders, and then you end up playing summer, winter. You know, as you see guys go through the process. Obviously, if you're not in season, it's easier to grow your velocity inside of that too. But postseason workouts, what would you say is a time frame where you see guys that can like really just start, getting out of that bell curve? Because that's where, even my last season, I remember just like running out of gas and then looking at the
Mm-hmm.
radar gun and being like, wow, we're throwing 86 today. So that's that's where we're at, and it would have been great for me to know why. The scaption
Mm-hmm.
obviously was that from running there. But on that higher level, what time frames do you normally see guys that can maybe recover from a season before you're seeing them be healthy?
Yeah, so that's going to be kind of based on that individual. And to use this as an example, I'll kind of dive into a couple different groups. And this is why we're so big on that post exam. And we've talked about this before. And I don't know if you're going to ask a question on this later on, but I think pitch counts are stupid. They don't make sense to me. They need to be individualized. And based on that recovery aspect is 100% tied to the individual. And to use an example, is I had a freshman in college, and his first outing, and I use this example all the time, he went 20 pitches with a 5-minute break, 20 pitches in a sim game. He does his post exam, he loses 7% or 6% strength. I forget the exact number. A week later, his coach has him repeat 20 pitches, 5-minute break, 20 pitches. Both of his fresh exams look great, but on this post exam, he lost, it was like 23 or 27% strength. Really taxing. 40 pitches, the exact same sim game scenarios, both of them thrown indoors, but one of them he responded great, one of them responded really fatiguing. And then I also give another example is, as I was building up my high school group of guys, I had a sophomore and I had a freshman. Now the sophomore is 170 pounds and the freshman is 6'4", 218 pounds. Big kid. Both throwing around that 76 to 78 mile an hour range. One of them threw 2 innings, 35 pitch sim game, and he lost like 3% strength. The freshman threw 2 inning, 35 pitch sim game and lost 43% strength.
Mm,
So nobody thinks that 35 pitches is absurd, right? But if I
right,
would have thrown that guy more, he's at a high risk of injury. They're
right.
just different. Even though one of them is built, he looks bigger, he looks stronger, all these other aspects, he's just a more fatigable athlete. Whether it's on that day or not, both those guys threw 35 pitches based on my state where I live in Utah, they should pitch tomorrow.
Hmm.
One of them is probably going to blow out, one of them is going to be fine. That's why pitch counts are stupid, is they have to be individualized based on how you personally, John, responds to your pitch totals. And
Right.
that's where over the course of a season, you can see these guys gain. Obviously, those gains are going to be smaller in a pro setting because, I mean, shoot, when I played in Mexico, I think it was 142 games when I played. And, I was signed for the second half of the year.
Hmm.
And then, just in indie ball in general is like roughly, 110 to 140, depending on the league you were in.
Hmm. Right.
And in high school, in college, a lot easier because you're only playing, sometimes 2 days a week.
Right.
So it's easier to make bigger progress in season for those lessened seasons. But to go back on that, when you're using that post exam, so for example, for those pro guys, they would pitch, they do their post exam. If they've lost, if they're in the yellow, tomorrow needs to be a less in volume throwing day. We're not looking to build that up. We're looking to recover the body. If everything's blue, go about your business as normal. It's that simple when it comes down to it. If you're seeing the purple, then don't even touch a ball tomorrow. You're just too fatigued. what's the point? And this is evaluating the nervous system as well, where everybody goes, well, how do we get good quality reps on a regular basis? Don't throw on a fatigued nervous system.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy when it comes down to it. But that's why it's so important, because maybe you had just gotten over the flu or eaten some bad tacos, which I've done in Mexico, and it puts you out on the toilet for a little
Yeah.
while.
Yeah.
And then that's going to impact the way that you handle pitch volume as well, because your
Hmm.
bacteria is changing in your gut. There's a whole lot going on. You may be dehydrated. And then your post exam on a 15 pitch come in for 2/3 of an inning, you may have lost 8% strength,
Right.
where normally, not being sick, you don't lose any strength at all. So that's why it's important to understand how you're adjusting on those. So those in-season gains aren't quite as big, but especially in the off season, if a guy's using weighted balls or weights or whatever that situation may be to really maximize it, you can use that fresh exam. And when your strength is really good, that's the day you can get more. So
Hmm.
I always use it with guys of going, I have one of the minor leaguers that we're working with, who last year, when we were working with him, topped out at 92.2. This year he's 96.6. So good progress on there. But what we've done is, on the days that his strength is really good, if we were going to do 70 weighted ball throws, we're going to bump that up to 85. If your strength is really good, let's push the boundaries today. If your strength is low, instead of doing 70, let's drop that down to 30. So we're still going to get work in, but we're going to lessen that to make sure that on our next weighted ball day we can make those throws up. So we're able to kind of adjust and change the sound mixer, in the sense, to make sure in the off season we can get those huge gains, and then we adjust in season to make sure we sustain and build slightly on those gains. So I got long winded. I can do that. Hopefully that made any sense at all.
No, it did. It did. Long-windeds are what we needed. That was, because the process, right? That was one of the questions that one of the parents asked, which was, when should I wait till the season's over? And obviously, I'm like, no, just start right
Mhm.
now. And they were like, well, I don't want to fatigue him and start him in a new program in the middle of the season. That could mess him up. Is that something that you've seen on your side? I mean, obviously, if you start getting stronger, you start a new program, there's an adjustment period to that right in there. For a high school athlete, have you heard anything from that, where once you get started, we're having issues with soreness or anything inside of the program, or do you see pretty clean results?
So I would say start in season. And I would go look up who Terry Ayers is. He's an ABCA Hall of Fame coach. He's been coaching high school for longer than I've been alive. He's probably one of the best pitching coaches on the face of the earth, realistically. And he started using the system last year, and he was at the ABCA booth, and he did a better job selling the product than any one of us did when it comes down to it. But he says he's been coaching, I think it's for 58 years. And he goes, this is the first time ever that I've never had someone say they had a sore arm. I've never had someone miss a start, because we use the system to adjust volumes. And then obviously that system is changing what their workload is through the training to make sure they're fixing those imbalances. So not only are they going to feel better and throw harder from the increased strength, but they're going to adjust their throwing volume. So now on a day, if a coach goes, hey, it's a long toss day, it's Tuesday, we long toss on Tuesdays. My strength is down. Okay, let's not have you long toss, because that could be detrimental, not just to the individual, but to the team. So now you're able to change that in season as you go. So even if they don't want to use the training, they need to use the post exam and the fresh exam and the arm primer to dial in their throwing on that day-to-day basis. Because just as important as cutting throwing volume, if you have a day that everything's up and it's supposed to only be like a 60-foot activation day, but your strength is fantastic, why not work on that slider? Why not work on your split finger? Why not get a few extra reps off the mound that day to prepare you for your next outing? And then to even piggyback more on that is, the sensor obviously is going to give you the customized training. But if you're putting in there that you're a reliever, and like maybe I'm pitching tomorrow based on all the information you're putting in, it's going to give you hybridized or more recovery based days on what it is you should be doing. So then you pair that with, if you pitched in the game and it gives you the recovery protocol, it's going to give you some nutrition, hydration, and sleep advice in there as well. So the app's doing a lot more than just doing strength testing and conditioning. It's giving you some other little key features of like, hey, you probably want to do something that's a little more anti-inflammatory based on your pitch totals, based on that post exam. You're going to want to kind of de-inflame the body. Looks like you're a little tired. Or, hey, you're looking good. Let's actually do a little bit more. So it's going to give you that information. And you mentioned the PDF earlier. We're actually revamping that nothing crazy, but we're going to add more detail into it because people are ready for it. They want it. And we're ready to start adding in some more kind of key points to help guys out. And then a lot of those athletes are starting to pair that with the coursework that we have to where now they're taking those MLB recovery habits course. They're seeing how that fits with their data. And they're like, oh, I should drink my tart cherry juice tonight because my post exam was here. And then they're able to kind of hybridize those aspects and use the data to maximize themselves so they don't get fatigued over the season. So the program will adjust your training volume based on what you're entering in, and that algorithm will understand if you're on a 7-day rotation, if you're pitching every third day, and it will make sure it's not overdoing your training. So again, hopefully that makes sense.
No, it really does. You know, the customization, you know, it's, you know, I'm just trying to get all of this awesome information, like you're saying, from right in there out of you, you know, and the, you're just bringing up great points that are the awareness and the adjustments and the things that, you know, obviously we've got parents all over the world that are just want what's best for your kid and want to
Hmm.
make sure that we don't have any injuries. And we try to explain it all the time, just like you said. Look, almost every person that plays this game long enough gets hurt in some aspect, and you just can't fight it. You know, you can do everything you can, and the arm care, at least awareness, is going to prevent you from, you know, I've got sad stories where kids went to a showcase, did really well. We prepared them for the showcase, and then they got asked by a coach, "Hey, would you mind filling in on this team?" And next thing you know, they throw back-to-back days, and then,
Hmm.
you know, and then it immediately takes me to, well, if when he called me and asked me, should I pitch? And then he told me he only threw 25 pitches, I could have just said, well, what's your arm score?
Yep.
You know, did you do your arm score? You know, what if you didn't, come in, let's find out, and you can make a better educated decision, you know, because I have done stuff in my career where I've pushed my arm where I've been like, this shouldn't happen. You know, I remember I
Yeah.
went to the NBC World Series, I guess 3 years ago now, 3 or 4, I think 4 years ago. Um, no, 5 years ago. It was right before COVID, so it was 2019. Yeah, 5 years ago, and I threw two CGs in 4 days, and I had a save um, after the 4 days, and so I ended up getting pitcher of the tournament. I think I had like 26 innings or something like that after I went right in there, and obviously I'm crazy, right? But I knew that I could get away with it, and then the interesting part was, you know, the radar gun told me that I was fine, right? Like, even at 4 or 5 years ago, I was still, I think it was, like, up to 92 in both of those starts, but I remember being in, and obviously the relieving one was way harder because you have to get going faster,
Hmm.
and, like, definitely couldn't get over 87, so it was just like, "Well, we're just gonna throw nothing but cutters today," so, you know, it's just how it's gonna go. And fortunately enough, I had a quick inning, which college kids can't stand a chance against cutters. It is what it is. You know, um, but you know, I just look back in my life, and there's so many scenarios where I was just like, I for sure was falsely confident on what where I thought my body was, you know what I mean? And then my mental to be able to control the baseball, I feel like was always one of my best aspects where it didn't matter, you know, you played in Mexico. It didn't matter how many mascots were on the field, how loud the speakers were, how much distraction the home, like for the people that don't know, and I always try to tell people this, like, home field advantage in Mexico is a different thing. It's a
Yeah.
they don't, there is no etiquette. There's no, they don't give a shit. They're blasting the horn, you know. I remember being playing against TJ for the first time and knowing about him. And I remember in the first inning, I gave up this weird chopper up the middle, and they used like a weird turf, and the guy got on, and I remember the center fielder giving me the ball for some reason, like skipping the shortstop, and I caught it. And as I looked over at first base to see the guy over there were four mascots all like waving at me, like having their arms up. Like one of them, like it was like a monkey with a dress on. He had his dress, and then the crowd's going nuts, and I'm going like, what in the world am I looking at right now? It was like a grandma, a monkey, a fireman, and then like the toro, right? The bull. And they're all just like behind him. And I'm like, there's no way we're allowed to just have random people on the field while it's playing, you know? But yeah, it just is what it is. So and then of course, right? You get your sign, you check the runner. And I remember I look over, I check the runner, and I'm like, yeah, you're still there. This is crazy, right? And I come set. And so, there's just so many scenarios and stuff, and that the baseball space is common, and it's a small world. So I just wanted to
Mhm.
share that story with you, especially over playing at TJ. So you see from there, because they love live entertainment down there. That is what it is. They were trying to bring a show to the fans, so the fans come back. So,
Yeah, Latin American baseball, if nobody's ever been to a Dominican Winter League game, they need to go. They're
oh,
amazing. They're
that's
great.
on the list, especially
They're
like a
some of the,
playoff
the
game.
best baseball experiences you can have.
Oh, I love it. I love how social media is so slowly creeping over there too, and you'll get, a
Oh
couple
gosh, I
years
think it was
ago.
2015 I was over there. 2015 or 24, I don't remember the exact year, but we were over there and we went and saw a Dominican Winter League game of the Estrellas versus Licey, I believe is how
Oh
you
yeah, that's
read
what I was
it.
gonna say. I
And it
was
was
like, they got
amazing.
rivals. They got
And
full rivals there.
it was in I think it's like Juan Dolio, which is where the Estrellas play, and it was awesome. It was great.
Yeah.
So it's fun. There's like people hanging on fences and shaking stuff. It's great.
Yeah, they for sure are passionate about their teams down there. It's
Hmm.
definitely you don't and I would say where I'm from in the South in America, like it's in Florida, football's a giant college football is a huge thing. It's the closest thing I've seen to that, but
Yeah.
still, like, they blow them out of the water. Like, my Mexican experience and some of the other countries that I've played in, it's like, no, like, Florida State, Florida, SEC football, I think you guys think you're the best fans on the planet. You don't stand a chance,
Yeah, until you go
Like,
to a Dominican Winter League game or you go, and man, when I played for Tijuana, we were the Cimarrones at the time, and then they went back to being the Toros after, and man, we were bad. We might have won like negative 35 games that year, but they still show up. They still love you, you know?
Yeah, they do. That's so true. Yeah, I still get messages from some of the winter ball teams that I played with that parents are, fans are you I see you're throwing still. Are you getting ready? Are you coming back? I'm like, man, they don't want 38-year-old me. Like they they want some big league name. They're like, yeah, but you were so good. I appreciate it, but they obviously don't care. So okay, so you know, trending, right? So we've evolved from the bands into this process. You've mentioned some things about some upgraded videos and some things. What's new coming down the pipeline that you guys are excited about?
Yeah, so obviously we got Android, a beta version of Android out finally. So you can test, but there's no training yet. So we have that beta version of Android, which everybody's been asking for about 3 years. We have the new PDF, which is kind of next on the hopper there. And then we have the updated training, which is coming out as well. So that updated training is going to be a lot more specific. It's going to be some new exercises, some new menu options. It's only going to be in the premium version, but it's going to have a lot more blocks that are involved in there because one of the great things is we've actually had people on the system long enough now that they've maxed out the training. That they're like,
Mm,
well, you finished the whole workout menu, so we have to recycle them back. And now it's like, okay, we got to really get this new training out because people have run through the whole program. So it took a while, but they ran through the program, which is good. But those are the two big things we have coming out right now. We also have, yeah, those are the two big ones. I guess we could say is we're
okay.
really revamping those right there.
Yeah, well, I mean, those are still big things. I mean, I love how long did it take people to finish that program?
So some guys it took about 2.5 years, but they're
Wow.
using it almost every day for 2.5 years. And then based on all that information that we've been gathering from those guys who are the consistent users, it's still in the works. We're trying to figure out all the coding and everything that goes with it to make sure it runs without a hiccup. But we're going to have a arm care recommended pitch count that's going to be in those PDFs. So as they test, that'll be things
Oh.
that comes out. So it will say, hey, this you maybe the tournament you're in says you can throw 120 pitches, but we recommend you actually throw 85 today. But then there's also going to be times where it's like, hey, your recommended pitch count is this. Maybe we recommend you throw more than what that
Mm,
is. So we
hmm.
don't want to undertrain the arm based on the way that your body is responding to things. So we're still working the kinks out to make sure that it loads that information for the players the way we want it to be loaded, and there's no bugs in that, obviously. But we're gonna
Hmm.
have an arm care recommended pitch count based on all your data that's in there. So that's gonna be something to help guys individualize stuff, and that now a parent, especially those parents, have that opportunity. Like you were saying, the kid goes back to back or back to back to back because they want to get seen, and now they can go in there and they pull up their phone, they look at it, they get their PDF, and it goes, maybe today's not the best day for me to go throw for this team because I'm not going to be at my best to showcase. And if there is someone there to watch, do I really want to get seen at 80%? So now you're able to kind of equip yourself to get better reps and better opportunities to be seen.
Yeah, that way you can stay at peak performance, which is
Yes,
obviously the
exactly.
hardest part for a young kid. I even obviously in high school you don't you don't have a clue, right? Like nobody's watching throwing down the line, like right? Like when's the last time you saw a coach patrolling catch play? That doesn't happen very often in high
Yeah.
school, right? Who's counting total throws, like total throws, and that was one of my questions that I wanted to know about. And then, how do we measure force output without any radar gun or a process of tracking as well? And I see it all the time where you ask the question, well, obviously you warmed up. How much did you warm up? I don't know, an average amount of time. Okay, well, did you an average amount of time to what? Like to who? To me, to you, to your coach's standard? Are you the last one down the line? Are you the first one done? Are you in the middle? Like are you in trouble like I was because I was throwing way too much down the line and then you wanted me to go take 100 ground balls and make 100 throws and then you know what I mean? So there's a bunch of different areas that you guys cover that just gets me so excited because it just give answers just like you said, where 5 minutes later you're like, well, why make that assumption now? Why not let this give
Mhm.
you from that? So and that rolls me into, you guys said some stuff and I want to get into the debate, of at
Mhm.
the ABCA with Eugene and you guys in there and my question is if the arm score maxes out at 150. Right? As you guys say the goal is 70. You guys said something about 120 arm score for some high level guys. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so arm score is just relative strength, and all relative strength is how strong you compared to your body weight. So if I weigh 100 pounds and I have 70 pounds of strength in all four of those measures, my arm score would be 70. I'm 70 pounds of my 100 of my body weight, and where we pulled arm score from was tracking guys from the Dominican Summer League all the way through the big leagues. When we'd go through and do our tests in spring training, the guys who had to miss a start, had to skip a bullpen, the ones who didn't make it out of spring training without something going on, wasn't a surgical case, they were below 70% on their relative strength. The guys who were above 70%, almost 100% of them made it through clean. And for the guys that were really high on that arm score, obviously those are your big, powerful arms. And one thing I will say is our major league demographic, I think our worst guy's like 95 on his arm score off the top of my head. So big leaguers have really strong arms. And that's where, you want to talk about the day. What comes first, the chicken or the egg, in a sense? It's like, well,
Hmm.
are big leaguers better because they have stronger arms? And this is our healthy demographic that we're speaking about. So that's where arm score came from, was measuring these force outputs in each one of those measurements. And the higher arm scores generally were the guys who are always going to be healthy. They're also the guys who generally bounce back a lot quicker. And
Hmm.
we'll get into that a little bit too, I'm sure. But that's where we started pulling that arm score from. And then SVR was one that we started digging into when me and Ryan were running weighted ball programs. And whether people love weighted balls, hate weighted balls, I think weighted balls are number one, the best thing that's ever happened to the game of baseball, and number two, the worst thing that's ever happened to the game of baseball. If you do them at the right time, they're fantastic. And what we found was the guys who were doing the weighted balls with a bad SVR were either getting hurt or getting worse. The guys who were doing weighted balls, regardless of where they were at with a good SVR, were gaining and sustaining velocity. So as we narrowed down our process of picking off that key metric, we really got guys improving rapidly on that. And then obviously the fatigue metric, and that's kind of where we pulled a lot of those key metrics from, was our information of pulling that from that pro database, and now we're mirroring that with our collegiate and our high school, and it actually holds up even more with those younger levels because strength is just so important to keep that arm healthy. I know I got a little off topic there, but one of the reasons I think we see that as such a big factor, and this will lead into, I'm sure, your question on the debate, but we had Hurston Waldrop on our podcast, and that guy went from Florida to AAA in the matter of about 4 months, something like that, 3.5 months.
Hmm.
And in that time, you got to consider he has the University of Florida pitching coach. He's got his private pitching coach back home in Georgia at the facility he trains at. Then he had a rookie ball pitching coach. He had a low A pitching coach. He had a high A pitching coach. He had a double A pitching coach. He had a triple A pitching coach, a major league pitching coach, a bullpen coach in the major leagues, and then 2 coordinators. That's 11 or 12 pitching coaches in a 4-month window.
Wow.
So all of them, you might get 11 different pieces of advice right there. All good, maybe bad, who knows? But the bottom line is you need to be robust enough to handle the information, because
Mm-hmm.
you might have to change. You might be making an adjustment. Maybe the mound's bad. And we're never going to have this perfect movement pattern when it comes down to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not possible. You mentioned playing in Mexico. Like, one day the mound may be fantastic. The next day it may be chewed up. And there's like, oh yeah, the grounds
Mm-hmm.
crew didn't show up and they didn't fix the
Mm-hmm.
fix the field, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Shoot, it was like that even in the minor leagues, playing in high desert. They had a one-man ground crew, and he wasn't always able to get everything done when it comes down to it. So
Yeah.
it's just, you have to be strong enough and robust enough to handle whatever changes the game is going to throw at you. Because it could be a coach asking you to change your stride angle. That could be the best or the worst decision for you. But if you're strong enough to handle it, you can at least find out.
Yeah, that's a great point. The strength to start even trying to pursue the Jedi level of, process where you really can learn how to spin the ball and create different shapes and everything on there. It's a great point about, we talk about it too on the younger side too, about how we just play games way too soon. Like, and then it's like you put them in a tournament and it's supposed to be like, competitive, but not. But then like they're adding a whole other level of stress because they want to win the tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've jumped back and forth between tournament teams and league teams, and I really love leagues because one
Mm-hmm.
game, one day, like it's really what we've been pushing a lot. And
Yeah.
parents are, well, I need him to build up. I get that, but like also, no, you don't, because he's 13. He
Yep.
could throw one innings, okay. We threw 7 pitches. I get it. I did that all my life. My whole life, I had one inning on a random team, and I threw 6 or 7 pitches, got 3 ground balls, and it's boring. It's over. My turn is over. I'm sorry. I couldn't throw 35 more pitches in that one inning and not give up a run. That's where the game takes you, in that process. And we just tell parents all the time that, and coming off of that was my next. We already touched on it a little bit on the pro side, but coming out of little league seasons, rolling into all stars, right into summer, like this time frame, it was very important for me to get this podcast from you guys and try to get it out to the public, because this is the time I see all the issues. I get,
Mm-hmm.
you guys are great with the arm. I've got some fun little stuff that I've learned over time too, body tempering and some stuff like that. I don't know if you've seen the Rogue. We don't do it for, I don't, obviously everybody, but there's some high school kids where we started off with the barbell and do some, some just from the forearm all the way up, where you just barbell steamroll your arm. It's one of the
Mm-hmm.
craziest feelings that feels amazing, as you go. And then we've got like an 80-pound a Rogue bar that we do reverse foam rolling, which is very interesting concept of like being able to create space in the vertebrae so the nerves work a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if you've done that or gone down that
No,
rabbit
I'm not
hole
seeing it.
either, but yeah, it came from it started off one of the first places over here in San Diego that I was at was called Pivotal Sports Performance, and it was a bodybuilder slash. It was just so many different things going on: Olympic lifting, bodybuilding, bikini, like there's all kinds of stuff. And one of the guys there, just a giant nerd, goes on rabbit holes, and he just starts telling me about body tempering and how Arnold kind of started it back in the 80s, where they're just like putting 45-pound plates on each other's hamstrings, trying to like get the tightness to break out and stuff from there. And so I started applying some of those concepts to like the forearms and the bicep. And then like there's one that's brutal. Like Rogue has this, is it Rogue? It's either Rogue or Kabuki. They have this 25-pound bar, and you can lay on your side and foam roll your lat. But like, it was explained to me where if you're foam rolling, when you are on your back, your muscles are actually active. And so they have to protect it because it has to balance
Mm-hmm.
on the foam roll. So it doesn't quite do the same thing. When you lay face down and you drop this 80-pound Rogue bar on your back and it smushes you, you can feel the space in your vertebrae because you're
Mm-hmm.
relaxed, you're off, you're not protecting anything. So once I did that, and then you could just feel like when you get done, you're like, oh, that's interesting. Like, and then obviously as you go down the rabbit hole, like, with Mark Pro and some other stuff, the priming of the nerves and trying to get the plaque off with nerve flossing, the things that go with that. Why not go after the spine and the tissue, especially that's behind the shoulder blade, that really gets
Mhm.
no love at all on it? So, there's just a lot of stuff that correlates to that. So, you know, I had, my guy Tim Desmarius, for Park Pro, go on here. Have you guys been able to combine any other technologies like Mark Pro with that to
Mhm.
see,
Yeah,
any
so
new
I
instances from
I
there?
actually use a Mark Pro with my guys. I use a Compex too. I personally like them both, but now that I've been testing guys on it, what I do notice is everything you can individualize it. So I actually have one player that I work with who Mark Pros prior to throwing. And the reason for that is it's activating him. He's getting really good fresh exam numbers where he'll go through, and I've messed with it to where he does Mark Pro and then a fresh exam. He does nothing and a fresh exam. He does our bands and then a fresh exam. And his best combination is Mark Pro for about 12 minutes, our band activation, fresh exam, and that primes his body the best to be ready to throw. I have other guys that if they do Mark Pro before they throw, it's brutal. I have other guys that if they do Mark Pro after they throw, they're more fatigued.
Mm,
So I have guys that do Mark Pro after they throw, they're more recovered. So
hmm.
it's got to be individualized. And I don't think there's such a thing as a bad tool or a bad teaching implement. There's just a bad teaching implement for an individual.
Right.
So, even you talk about the debate like water bags, there's some guys that get thrashed up by a water bag. There's some guys that thrive with a water bag. Towel drill. There's some guys that don't like the towel drill. There's some guys that thrive on the towel drill. There's
Hmm.
no such thing as a bad tool. There's a bad tool for you. So
Right.
I personally like Mark Pro. I view it as more of, from the information I've seen doing it with the testing, is I like it for activation pre-throw. And then I will use it for recovery if I have to bounce a guy back on short rest. So for instance, I had a guy pitch on Friday, went 103 pitches, post exam was fine, and then he had to throw on a short rest on a Tuesday. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, pitching day 4, was not able to get a pre outing bullpen in, but based on schedule, we had to bounce him back. So I Mark Pro'd him so he could bounce back and be take any precaution just to make sure he's fresh and ready to go. And he ended up throwing like 107 pitches. Did fine in his outing, no issues, recovery, everything looked fine. So I'll use it in instances like that. So I don't think there's such a thing as a bad tool, but
Hmm.
also people need to be aware inflammation is sometimes a positive thing because that's how you actually build and get strong. You do need some inflammation. So just
Hmm.
like you're talking about, like doing the rolling with added weights and different things like that. I've done that with a barbell on my quads, hamstrings. I'm thinking about maybe even now what you're saying, doing it with some lats for some guys that have
Oh,
those tough spots.
there's the
Um,
spot right here,
mhm,
right behind it. Like, have you seen it made me, there's one where like you get on the barbell, so you get on a squat rack, you put the barbell from that right there, and then you kind of like hang your arm over it. I've seen it on
yeah,
Kelly
yeah,
Starrett's. He's done it where they hang over and then you hold a kettlebell so it kind of pulls it down into that right in there.
interesting, yeah,
I'll I'll do it with my guys where we'll get the barbell into that right there, and then we'll rotate on it, and they love
hmm
it. And then
yeah,
also that tricep tendon gets so stuck right in there too. So I'll have them do some extensions while on
hmm
the like just leaning on it, and then they'll extend in a 90 and then they'll roll it fully extended arm,
yeah.
and it really just unlocks that sticky spot, which is interesting on sticky, and you're a nerd like me. I've heard it explained to me of so knots slash stuck tissue or whatever we want to define it as, because I've heard it defined as so many times, are literally sticky, which could be caused by the exhaust of the muscles. So, like,
hmm
I threw the other day, right? So my back's tight, I'm stuck, and it was it makes sense, right? Like to me, if I'm in the concept, so help me if I'm wrong from this or you believe it or not. But I love theories that people throw out, like general ideas where it's so simple that I'm just like, all right, I kind of like that. That kind of makes sense. And so that's where that body tempering idea had come from, right? And so in order to like flush out like Mark Pro or some of the other devices and stuff from able to do, pressure is one of the best ways to break up some of that tightness. And that's where, that body tempering stuff started with, especially with that right in there. We also have another tool. I'll send you a couple of these links of the stuff that I found. We have this other
hmm
one I saw from this chiropractor lady. It's basically this. ball bearing stick that has this kind of like M type shape, so it would like protect your spine, and it's just such a roller. And so you just lay face down and then you just roll the tissue right along the spinal
Hmm.
column, and that one also feels amazing. Everybody loves that one too, especially where I've noticed where guys like are emotionally upset about either the number on the 100% day or something from there.
Yeah.
You can actually like when you go through it, like you'll get to those two nerve canals that on this, right behind the shoulder blade and the top of the trap, and they'll just be so locked up. I'm like, you okay? And they're like, I feel so tight and bad. I'm like, maybe you actually weren't as strong as you thought you were. Maybe this stuck
Hmm.
tissue was in there into that. So I'm doing a couple of those little body tempering tricks that we use on stuff. We've seen massive scores go up too on that. Where I've gotten the report from the guy and he's showing me some purple on the scaption, and then I'm like, all right, well there's another one that's real interesting. Like it's kind of like the throwing arm across one. If you lay down on your arm like that, it really pulls the scap out of the way, and that tissue that's right inside of that, you can really get in with like a little knobber or your thumb, and
Yeah.
and then massage that out too. And so I've done that too, where I've hit that spot in the back or maybe even the trap and done a trap release and then done another score and then see it jump up again. And I'm going like, well, that
Hmm.
was that's interesting because that means that the signal to the muscle maybe have been prevented due to this tightness. Is
Yeah.
is that something technically
No,
as
yeah.
far as muscle stuff that sounds at least
From my
on the
understanding
line?
of it, that's correct. Again, I'm
Yeah.
not a neurologist,
Right.
but I
Right.
we had a coach with the Angels, probably if not the best infield coach in the world, one of them who did a lot mentoring me when I was with the Angels. His name was Mike Gallego. Played with the A's, Yankees, been all over the
Hmm.
place. But I remember I'm sitting there one day and I'm on my computer just like feverishly going over stuff. I'm like, it's like, what are you looking? He's like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh gosh, I'm looking at all this like neural pathway programming research articles and going through all these things. And then he just simplifies it so much, and he's like, oh yeah, like your brain on the days you're stiff and sore, your brain just says you can only go so fast. And I'm like, yeah, that makes it pretty simple. So from my understanding of it, not being a neurologist and then taking like the Mike Gallego, keep it simple approach, is like, yeah, if you're bound up, that's your brain saying, hey, we pushed pretty good yesterday. We're only going to let you move so fast so we don't get hurt.
Right.
It's kind of like a natural protection, like making sure you don't run red line, but we're gonna let you run as far as we can on that
Hmm.
on those RPMs on the day. And that's where all those tools come in, and that's why it's so important. And to use another example, we have a college guy that we do a lot of consulting work with, and he loves the body blade, and he's
Hmm.
over there hammering out the body blade, and it's like almost a thing where it's a crutch for him, like mentally. And we go, well, how is that actually responding for your body? He goes, I do my body blade every day too. I have to do my body blade day too. Okay, well, let's actually do it. Let's not do it and see if you recover faster.
Right.
He actually recovered faster without the body blade. So, and we did this over, 4 or 5 starts. It's like, just don't use it. Some guys it might be great for, and that's where like what I've seen with the Mark Pro is there's specifically 4 guys on my staff. You're going to Mark Pro. I have the other 6 guys on my high school staff that it's like, if you want to use it, go ahead. But I'm not seeing any giant notable differences with you 6, but you
Hmm.
4, you're going to use it. You're going to use the Mark
Hmm.
Pro. And then one of the
Right.
other things we're doing is I'm actually using the Compex because I want to know, because there's always going to be a point where that training is going to plateau. And then if
Hmm.
they're already using our heaviest resistance bands, if I can get the Mark Pro on those, or not the Mark Pro, the Compex that actually gives you kind of a training stimulus as well, can I
Hmm.
enhance your training stimulus using the bands to get you off that plateau? So for the guys who are kind of hitting that mark where they're having trouble gaining that arm score, gaining that SVR, can we stimulate the muscles while you're doing your training? I don't dare to do it with weights yet. I know that they're doing on the Compex website. That scares me. But if I can do it with the bands, I'm a little more confident, or an isometric exercise. So I'm messing with some of those right now to see if we can get a little better progress out of those guys
Yeah.
hitting that flat spot.
You
So
got you just made me think about like the pitching doctor, like the ARP wave and all the stuff that I see for that. And I'm just
mhm.
like, we're strapping wires to hamstrings and doing wall
Yep.
sits and just doing. And I'm just like, buddy, like I've done a podcast with him and talked about it, and that brought me in. It's perfect segue, because there's something that I've heard a long time ago, and I don't necessarily see. I haven't really seen a lot of data on it, and I don't really know how to measure it, but I believe that there is like strength and resilience created into a move that you can repeat for a very long period of time without getting
Hmm.
hurt, which is one of the things that I think like my body has. I have not changed what I've been doing for 14 years, like since I was a pro, since I figured out this Dominican throwing style that I've kind of, figured out and gone through. And since then, I've been like, well, and to your point too, like you're saying, like I have seen things, and I know you have too, where I've seen degenerates sit in a chair all day long and then at 10:30 decide to get out of the chair and throw 100 miles an hour, and they did
Hmm.
nothing. And I was around that human. I was his roommate. You know what I mean? We ate together. We did not. You did, dude. You did nothing. I worked my butt off for 95. I'm doing mobilities. I'm doing everything I possibly can to get my body to go there. And you ask these guys, well, how do you still throw 100? And they're just like, well, I just built up to it, and I guess that's just what I do. So and knowing what I know now and how long that I've been throwing post since my injury, and I can constantly push my arm and my body, and I'm the I'm the filler on live AB days. Like I am the sparring partner where like, oh, somebody needs
Hmm.
some time. Okay, I'll just toot toot toot. 2 minutes later, I'm 85 and we're partying
Yeah.
and we're going. That way we don't lose the flow, you know? So, is that something you've heard before? Because like building up resilience to emotion, that way, the motion is strong and you can handle it, and especially over a lifetime.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, there's this new resurgence of stuff, and I say new resurgence is kind of like an oxymoron, obviously,
Hmm.
because everyone thinks it's this new stuff of movement patterns and oh we have to keep create. It's been around for like ever,
Yeah.
like
Hmm.
how does a guy move? Make sure they move within their normal range of movements, but we also need to make sure we're strong enough to be repeatable.
Hmm.
So from my experience in doing this with, high end players and low end players, and man, Ryan always brings it up. I was hand digitizing every pitch from every guy that threw, as well as anybody we were going to trade for. I would go through and hand digitize to get rid of any, if you're measuring a guy and I'm measuring a guy, I don't want a difference in the measurements. I was also the one strapping the 3D motion capture sensors and breaking a lot of that data down and going through kinematic sequences and everything. Our guys with the most consistency from a kinematic sequence on a 3D motion analysis, 2D motion analysis, measuring stride angle, measuring whatever it may be, our guys that were the most consistent were the strongest athletes. And when I say strongest athletes, and this is where everybody gets thrown off, I'm not talking about a guy who can be really good at a hang clean. I'm not talking about a guy who can squat 1,000 pounds or bench, you know, 5x body weight or whatever number you want
Hmm.
to throw on there.
Right,
I'm
right.
talking about functional fitness. So the guy that is strong enough to handle their body movements with force and power. So the sensor, the guys with the best arm scores, generally, if you have a really strong shoulder, that tapers down to having a strong lower body because you can't have one without the other realistically.
Hmm. Yeah.
So they play hand in hand of each other. That goes back to what we were saying earlier, where this is why we measure the shoulder and we don't measure the entire body because we can get 90+% of what we need out of those shoulder measurements.
Yeah.
And our guys who had the best shoulder measurements were also our best guys on single leg work, our balance pad work, functional movement screens, different things like that. They were our best athletes when it comes down to it. So you can't have one without the other, to where it's like you need to have a consistent movement pattern. And one of the guys they talk about, I think it was Cliff Lee. I had a buddy who played with Cliff Lee, and he's like, yeah, he would just do like pull ups all day while he was squirrel hunting or something like that. I'm
Yeah.
probably getting the story wrong, so don't
Yeah,
quote
yeah,
me
yeah. No, I've heard
100%.
it. You're not
But
wrong.
it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
he did what he
yeah.
needed to do based on his aspect. And then everyone
Yeah.
goes back to Greg Maddux. Greg Maddux was like a Pilates style freak, you
Yeah.
know, which is a lot of that functional fitness. And it's a lot of like what we're doing with the bands and different things like
Right.
that, to where we're
Hmm.
building that balance, robustness, and the ability to move around your plane of rotation, around your stride angle, around what your body does, because you need to be repeatable. A guy is there's I can't think of anybody who's long-term successful at the higher collegiate levels, the minor leagues, or in the big leagues, or independent ball for that matter, that will have giant variance in his stride angle or his stride length. I can't think of anybody. Those guys
Hmm.
are just not consistent. The hitters get better and they see something that's different and they hit a double. They hit a home
Hmm.
run. They see something
Hmm.
off and they're able to take that pitch. It works at the young levels, but you do need movement consistency. But you will not have movement consistency unless you have physical robustness.
Hmm. Love that. Love that. So you hit a lot right there. I'm just first thing I took off on was Leo Mazzoni and the Braves and Maddox and that whole process inside of that. Um, and them, my dad bought the Leo Mazzoni book, and they were the first ones were doing Coke can empties and everything's
Mm-hmm.
inside of that. But as a young kid. So how old are you?
30, I don't know, 35 or 36. I'm one of those. I don't
Yeah,
remember.
I just turned 38, so we're right around the same age range. So we feel the same ideas from that right in there. So, well, I feel like we covered a lot. Appreciate your time. I don't want to eat up too much more to it from that right in there. I love all the new stuff that's coming down the pipeline. I'm excited about all that. I can't wait to see it. I did have one more question that I put on
Hmm.
here, which was nerve flossing. With the amount of stuff that you guys do, is that something you're thinking about implementing into your program? Do you value it? What do you guys think about nerve flossing?
Yeah, we actually just talked with a guy about nerve flossing, and I don't have a ton of experience in doing it. Some people really like it. There's a couple guys that I've seen that do it and they do it really well. And there's other guys that do it to where they're not doing it, they're doing like a very bad version of blood flow restriction.
Hmm.
So, like I said, there's no such thing as a bad tool. There's no such thing as
Hmm.
a bad implement. There's just a bad implement for you.
Yeah.
And I'm not overly well versed in nerve flossing, and I got lucky to have a guy, Andrew Hawkins, who was the PT I leaned on a ton, as well as another guy, Yusuke Takahashi, when I was with the Angels, who he's back in Japan now, but two of the best PTs, ATs I've ever come across in my life. And if my kid ever got hurt, those are the only two guys that I would go to and saying, Andrew Hawkins, or I'm sending you to Japan to work with Yusuke. Those are the two guys that I trust, my kid with. But Andrew Hawkins did a lot where he would walk guys through how to do this stuff appropriately. So they were really
Hmm.
educated on our end. But then I also saw some guys come in from other organizations where their fingers are turning purple and blue. And it's like, I don't think you're doing the nerve flossing.
Yeah.
So from my experience, if you're doing it right, it's probably going to be pretty good for you. But you have to just make sure you're doing it right.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I went through PT, I had the traditional, like just the little teacup things and stuff right in there. And now I've evolved into something that's a little bit more free form inside of the idea where it's like hand expansion and like the
Mm-hmm.
fluidness of the fingers. That's actually something I've seen with a bunch of my kids that have location or release point and accuracy issues where like if you have them do like finger rolls and like how smooth the finger rolls, you can actually see like where like one of the fingers gets real
It gets
clunky.
clanky.
Yeah. And so like,
To touch on that real
just
quick, that was
go
something
ahead.
that helped me a ton. And we actually just did that live stream on the Yips. And like I did a whole bunch of finger stuff and different things because I thought I blew out. Because it was right after I got done playing in Mexico. Gosh, I think, and you know how they are at keeping stats down there back when we were over
Yeah.
there. It was brutal. I had like
It's
15 at bats though, somehow. Don't know where I got at bats from. We didn't even hit as pitchers. It was American League rules, but
yeah.
I got at bats somehow.
Yeah.
But
I'm
I
I'm
think I
missing like
threw in
3 seasons
80.
from my yeah.
Oh, dude. I think I was in signed for 89 games or something like that first year, and I threw in 78. I was up all the time, and I was starting and relieving. So I
Oh
was
yeah.
getting
They
hit
don't
all
they
the
don't
time.
give a shit. Yeah, for
No,
sure.
man, like I thought I blew out. I couldn't feel my hand. I was like throwing balls all over the place at one point. And when they went through and I got an MRI and a nerve test done, all my ligaments were I had a partially torn labrum, which I think everybody does, but I had a whole bunch of nerve issues. In my fingers, when I would be going down, it would be like clunk 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 clunk, and my nerves
Hmm.
wouldn't communicate. So a
Yeah.
lot of that stuff, that hand things, I just got to piggyback on that to say how important that stuff is. That even if you don't have anything, it's not going to hurt you to get
Can
better
you
mobility in
I
your fingers.
this is my favorite test for it. Can you do this? Yeah. So apparently that's the end of it that like so like if you go full in range to the side and then
Mhm.
do that move, you can feel it directly. And like
Yeah,
all of our if you look at their fingers, their fingers they don't end up being like clunky like that or
yeah,
something.
they're like claws.
Yeah, exactly. So they can't like push it out inside of the idea. So that's one of the ones that we do inside of that. And then you can do it upside down and we do it upside down, and then you can add a little neck move to it, and then you can like twist. So I'll twist my hand with my
Hmm.
neck floss, and then add some of these little figure eights with it, and it feels amazing. But it's something I caught myself doing all the time, you know? And then there's also like the angles. It's like the nerve stuff to me is really interesting because it's always about like reaching to spaces that you don't go to. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so like I'll even do nerve flossing. A funny thing, funny story, like life is weird, right? I remember doing some of these weird like shoulder rolls, like down and up with the nerve flossing as I was like driving down the road going to the ballpark one day.
Yeah.
Like I just like reached behind me to grab something like you obviously shouldn't do. And when I did it, I was like, oh, there's a pinch. And so I just started doing it like every day where I was like reaching behind me and like rolling my shoulder down and like expanding my
I
hand.
call that bullpen science.
Yeah,
If
for
you're just like
sure.
sitting in the bullpen and you're like, that felt kind of good. Hey, pull on.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah. Hey, man. Hey, you know, and that's and nerves, right? So that and there's a couple other little tricks that I have too, where, like obviously you can do a little pop of the back, create a little space in the vertebrae. And then my chiro did one to me that's interesting. So there's four angles of pull. So the way he explained it to me is like the ligament that goes where the humerus that goes into the cup when we throw and the tissue becomes longer, which like it was funny. I was explaining it to a parent yesterday because he was watching my live feed and he's like, how many pitches did you throw? And I was like, well, I only know this because the hit tracks and I set it up to count it, but I threw 351 pitches. And he's like, how did you do that? I'm like, dude, that's like 20% power. Like I'm
Mhm.
literally throwing like 67 miles an hour. Like I'm not trying. And one of the things that was interesting was I was talking about my hand the whole time and I was going, and he was doing like this little finger test that I was saying. I was like, just do one at a time. And like he just couldn't move his birdie finger at all. Just couldn't move it. He's like, well, what is that? I was like, dude, go down the rabbit hole. I don't know. Medial nerve, maybe. I have no idea. But he ended up doing like a couple of those little exercises and then like DMs me back and he's just like, well, apparently I think I've had a messed up birdie finger forever, and I just thought I was really bad at sliders, and apparently my brain was not really bad at sliders. My fingers were bad at sliders, and I said,
I've already
I don't
taken
think,
a note. I'm going to start testing that out on my guys.
yeah, dude, like I think it's tremendous, especially like me being so like this. I think cutter guys are this, like that's the answer,
Hmm.
and then this turns into my dominant one, and so like I can't
Hmm.
even. I see even my
Yeah.
edges. Yeah, yeah. There you
I
go.
always
That's
had
your.
that natural cut. And everybody
Yeah.
always, and that's the awful thing is everybody always took it
Oh,
away
look at
from me.
this. I didn't even
Got
know we got
balloons coming
balloons.
up.
We got
Yep.
balloons coming up on cutters. Yeah, so like I don't have a ball on it, but one Edgertronic session and I saw exactly why. And so then
Hmm.
you ask the next question. Well, if this is the fastest way for me to throw the baseball and it's cutting, like should I even try to straighten it out? And that gets into the same thing like you'd go into. Well, maybe, I don't know. Let's see what happens. And so the more I threw and as I went, I mean like dude, the highest spin rate I have ever gotten on a slider is 3,300. And that's back closer to that was on Rapsodo though years
Hmm.
ago, and on the TrackMan's probably like 3,100. But I don't even know what it was when I was in prime shape in Mexico, like when I
Hmm.
was still in 95. That would be an amazing piece. But one of my biggest things with that was like nerve health. Like that was the thing when they did. So after I had a olecranon fracture, and then a year
Hmm.
later they had to go in and do ulnar nerve transposition. And as they did that, that was the biggest thing where I felt like my arm could handle it. And then the way Dr. Andrews explained it to me was that when they moved it out of the canal, it's out of the impact zone of the force of the arm going through. So I don't get as inflamed as much because of my arm. My nerve is, a couple
Hmm.
inches from where it is, and it has space to work. So I think that's one of the reasons why that I don't necessarily get hurt all the time when I'm throwing from right in there. But just that hand expansion one is one of the best ones that I do. And like there's a funky angle too, because like I'll do it. I started doing it off the bed, and now we do it. We have a little training table, so I'll have them go where their left hand's holding it, the throwing arm is hanging off, so it's just draped off on under the ground or close to the ground, and then I'll have them do the hand expand, and then I'll have them do wrist extensions with the hand expand, and immediately in the top of that trap right there where that nerve passed through, immediately they'll feel tingles. And I'm like, okay. So then we'll break out like a little knobber tool and we'll soft tissue the top of it
Hmm.
right there. And then we'll do it again and then it goes away. And then they're just like, whoa. So like the Cairo move is when you yank, you can literally yank the wrist down to remove the humerus center out. And he was telling me that he thinks that because we throw so much that we get micro dislocations inside the cup of that AC of the
Hmm.
shoulder because of those hooks that are down here. So like it'll get tired and then it'll sag and then it'll just touch the bottom and then it'll heal. And then that's when you're just like, ugh. And he said, and
Yeah.
so like he did it to me the first time he did it to me, dude. And if you've never had anybody like yank on your arm down, it is you get tingles, you get cold, and then like as you start moving it, it all of a sudden it starts feeling lighter, like it feels better from there. Now,
Hmm.
obviously, if you have some sting right in there, but he's done it. He's done 4 different angles. He does straight down. He does a little bit forward, so it pulls me there. He does a little bit behind, and then he'll do to the side, and like it is the craziest. And then he'll pop my elbow. Like that's the other one that's really funky, where he will actually like push, he'll like flip it up. So he'll get the
Hmm.
humerus to come up out of it. And to me, it feels like cobwebs being cleaned out of the joint. Now,
Hmm.
that may not be true, right? But like when whatever placebo is happening when he does that, and then like all of a sudden I start moving around, I'm like, dude, this thing feels light and
Hmm.
ready to go. Especially compared to the left side. Like if I move, as soon as I move to the left side when I don't do them, like it definitely feels clunky, but you're not even aware of it until that thing happens. So, and I know that's big in Japan.
Yeah.
I've seen videos and stuff where like their trainers are just constantly ripping on their pitchers' arms, where it's like this guy laying on a table and he's just like, and, just getting ripped off from there. So that's, nerve flossing. And then like, that Cairo thing, that would be my questions to you would be like, you go down that rabbit hole. Cause that would be my first thing. That was my first thing. Cause I'm so big on the nerve flossing idea. And I've been like, well, I feel like this would be easy to implement with anybody in that, but how would you test it to add it to it? Right. Like what would be, obviously you can't do what's it called? The carpal tunnel test, which when they did that on me was hilarious. Like they're like, "Oh, you have carpal tunnel." I was like, "Oh, really? A pitcher that has carpal tunnel?"
Yeah.
Like, who knew? Of course we have carpal.
Exactly.
You have really bad carpal tunnel. Listen, I broke my elbow. Like I don't know what you're gonna tell me about my wrist right now. I'm sure my wrist is fine compared to the fracture that's in this thing. You know, so. Awesome. Well, do you have anything else that you'd like to promote on the company or anything?
No, yeah, just yeah, thanks for having me on. We appreciate it. And obviously if we like that guys are testing different ideas with our system. And
Yeah.
we view us as we call ourselves system agnostic. I'm obviously a big proponent of the NPA, but it doesn't matter what system you're doing. If you want to go in there and, nerve floss, whatever it may be, it's open source. Test it, make sure that it works for you because I cannot emphasize it enough. There is not a bad system out there. There's just a bad system for the individual, and there's no better way to find that out than actually tracking it using the data. If you're getting stronger, if you're getting better, keep going down that rabbit hole. In your words, if you're not, explore a different rabbit hole. So find what's going to work for you, and everybody's so different. Everyone's so unique and individual. You just have to keep hammering it out.
Yeah, 100%. And then don't forget use code Cutternation at checkout. Make sure you get
Yep,
yourself a little
exactly.
discount. You know, the diameter is by far the coolest thing. Like I was telling you, the Mexican League guys that I've showed this stuff to or whatever, that they're so excited about just learning about that process from there. And I just kudos to you guys. You've done a phenomenal job. The app is so amazing. Every person that I show it to, that we go in there, that I'm like, look, this buy the device, take it with you. You know, I'm as you learn, it's great that you've been in Mexico because I'm sure you've seen the things. Mexico's like old school 80s football, right? Like you don't want to be in the training room. Like if you're in the
Hmm.
training room, they find out about it, like it's a problem. So I would I would pay off my my trainers for sure. I'm like, do not put me on that list. Please don't put me. I know you just rubbed me down, but just don't write my name down, okay? I don't want anybody knowing from that, right? But if I'd have had that myself, and I could have been in the hotel room assessing myself, because I'm sure you've been around it, dude. I saw so many of my
Hmm.
teammates freak out, and they're just like, dude, I can't throw. And I'm like, what do you mean you can't throw? And they're like, woke up today, feel like my arm's in a cast. So, just having something that could give independent information would have been so
Hmm.
valuable to me. And that's it. That's the only thing that's like my number one thing to all these parents. And I'm like, okay, sure. You freak out, you call the doctor. What's he going to say? Wait 2 weeks, start physical therapy, do physical therapy for 6 weeks, and now 8 weeks later, you fine? And they were like, oh, I'm like, yeah, that's the standard answer to like
Hmm.
95% of the problems. Wait 2 months and then try again. And they were like, well, the season's over. Exactly. Exactly why. At least do this. This
And
at
ideally,
least,
if you started at the right time, you don't end up at that point.
right.
And that's the goal, is to
100%.
never end up there.
Right. Well, and we know the idiots that are baseball players because we are them, right? We
We
don't.
are the yeah, we're the
I,
same
I I
ones.
I tell everybody, I'm like, look, I broke my arm out of sheer stubbornness and as well as trying to do everything I possibly could for the team. And your son's probably going to make that same mistake. So let's not do that and decide
Hmm.
that if there's some reason, especially the arm score, that we don't feel good, and coach goes, we need you today, you can at least punch him in the face with, well, my arm score is telling me that it's not time to do this. So anyway, once again, I appreciate your time, buddy. This has been amazing. I cannot wait to chop this up and get this out. This will be everywhere. Don't forget to use code Cutternation, armcare.com. Jordan, outstanding, buddy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.